I've been playing competitive Pokemon singles for over a decade, folks, and I've dabbled in every single generation of OU at least a little bit. Some more than others, of course, and in every generation I have Pokemon that I like and Pokemon that I dislike. So in this video, I'm going to highlight my favorite Pokemon to use in every single competitive generation of OU. From Gen 1 to Gen 9. Gen 1 is a famously messy metagame with a lot of mechanical quirks and glitches that define it. It was the first game in the franchise, so they were still figuring stuff out, of course. But I think that the unique mechanics and the kind of bare bones simplicity of the metagame gives it a charm that brings me back. I do like to play Gen 1 OU every once in a while. It's fun to play a metagame where you don't have to think that hard about team building. There are definitely some annoying interactions in this metagame too, though. You'll often find situations where, for example, two Chanseys will spam Ice Beam against each other, fishing for a freeze. Paralysis chance comes into play very often. There's much higher crit chances, so there's just a lot of variance in the metagame that can be frustrating. That being said, a lot of Pokemon function very differently in this metagame than they do in later games because of the unique mechanics. You know, there's Tauros with Hyper Beam is one of the best late game cleaners. You have like Wrap works completely differently. And one of my favorite Pokemon that is totally different in this game than any other game is Articuno. Because the special stat is actually one stat, this is special attack and special defense in one stat. Articuno is very powerful offensively, and Articuno's Blizzard is actually the most powerful special attack in the game. Back in the day, Blizzard had 120 power and 90 accuracy, which is really strong. And with a 10% freeze chance, that's also really good because in Gen 1, if you get frozen, you just can never thaw out. It's really powerful. Unless you get hit by a fire type move, that's the only way, but fire type moves are not very common. So Articuno is awesome in this gen. It's actually like a kind of a mixed attacker because it also has access to Hyper Beam and Double Edge. I really love this set. It's not the most viable thing in the world, but I think it's usable and you can build around it, and it's one of my favorite things to use in Gen 1 OU. This powerful Blizzard and finishing things off with Hyper Beam and using Articuno as a late game cleaner. It's kind of similar to Zapdos. Zapdos does similar stuff, but what I like about Articuno is the sheer power of the Blizzard and the fact that it can threaten the ground types right on, and the lesser seen Golem. It's kind of an example of what's unique about Gen 1 and what's cool about it. Now we move on to Gen 2 OU, a metagame defined by the absolute dominance of Snorlax. Snorlax is the best Pokemon in the game, even in Ubers, and some other dominant forces include Zapdos, Cloyster, and Raikou. This gen is not only defined by the dominance and ubiquitous nature of Snorlax, but Rest Talk mechanics. Rest and Sleep Talk are some of the most powerful moves in the metagame because Sleep Talk can actually call Rest. In later games this was changed. Sleep Talk, if it calls Rest, Rest will fail, but in this gen you can actually kind of have an infinite loop of continuous healing up to full with Sleep Talk, and because of that, Snorlax with Rest Talk, Zapdos with Rest Talk, Raikou with Rest Talk are incredibly powerful. And this generation is often seen as a very slow-paced and boring generation, but I think that there are tools at your disposal to speed things up, and one of my favorite Pokemon that can definitely do so is Nidoking, my favorite Pokemon in the format. Nidoking is very unique in this format compared to its role in later generations where you get sheer force. It's primarily a special attacking wall breaker. In this format, it's kind of like a mixed threat that is a progress maker with Lovely Kiss, which I think it loses in later games. And you can actually go itemless with Thief is really good on this because this is the main form of item removal. Leftovers really dominates Gen 2, so Nidoking can steal a leftovers from something important like Zapdos and Snorlax, removing their longevity. It can have a wide array of different coverage options like Ice Beam, Fire Blast, Earthquake, Thunder. It has so many options, and what's cool about Gen 2, some people would say it's cool, some wouldn't, is that you can actually max all of your EVs. From Gen 3 onwards, they changed it so you can only maximize 2 stats. A side effect of this is that mixed attackers are really good because you don't actually have to invest specifically in one offensive stat or the other for your physical and special attacks to both hit as hard as possible. So something like Nidoking can safely run whatever coverage it wants, and you see a lot of diversity in movesets in Gen 2 because of that. A Pokemon that really emphasizes the cool aspects of Gen 2's unique mechanics is Nidoking, and I always love using this Pokemon in the format because it speeds up what is otherwise a pretty slow-paced metagame, and it can actually make progress by regaining momentum with Lovely Kiss and all of its offensive coverage and Thief. Yeah, love this Pokemon in Gen 2 OU. Now we move on to Gen 3 OU, folks, and it's no secret that this is my favorite metagame of all time. I think it strikes the perfect balance in everything, in terms of, you know, variety and sets and Pokemon choices, central threats that are manageable, a good balance between offensive and defensive mechanics, not too many OP free options like Knockoff, Scald, U-Turn, and high power moves. Everything's kind of low power level, reasonable. There's no Stealth Rock yet. it, but also there's huge moveset variety in all the top threats. There's so much creativity. I think my favorite Pokemon in this metagame is Medicham. And I know I pronounced this name incorrectly, but it's how I've pronounced it since I was a kid. So Medicham is the correct pronunciation, but it's hard to break 10 years of habit. And let me tell you, folks, no one has corrected me on this until I became a YouTuber. Years and years of discussing Medicham in the schoolyard, I didn't receive one, well, actually, it's Medicham. It's only in recent years that this has become a problem. So I'm going to keep calling it Medicham, and you can't stop me. What's awesome about Medicham is that it is a Pokemon that has the ability to threaten the entire world. It has an absurdly high attack stat with the Pure Power ability. It has the great offensive coverage combination of Fighting and Ghost. Focus Punch can nuke stuff. Rock Slide can punish the flying types trying to resist you. Once you get a Medicham on the field, it's kind of like the world is your oyster and you can make miracles happen. You can also be quite creative with its sets. I mean, you can run... A set that I love is Lumberry, because early in the game when sand is up and you get sand chipped, you actually bluff Choice Band. So they might go to Gengar on your Brick Break, and then they think you're Choice Band because you take Sand Chip. You surprise them with a Shadow Ball, and then you're actually immune to their incoming Will-O-Wisp because the berry will cure it. That's one of my favorite lead sets. You can also run Select-Berry sets with certain bulk thresholds. It also has Baton Pass to punish switches out to Scarm or other pivots, and I love the way that this Pokemon just disrupts the standard team structures and wall breaks and punishes passive greedy teams. I love that it's very prediction reliant and it can get so many KOs if you just make the right move. I like the psychological warfare it instills in opponents. Even though, you know, prediction reliant Pokemon like this can feel like a bit of a guessing game and like what are they going to click, but I think there's an element of psychology where you can have a sense of what they want to do and try to punish that, and I think great players often succeed with Medicham because they are good at doing that. They can understand the game state, understand their opponent, and make a move that punishes exactly what they think the enemy is going to do, which makes it a very powerful Pokemon in the hands of a skilled player, I think. So I really love Medi in Gen 3 OU. It's my favorite Pokemon in the form. Now I'll move on to Gen 4 OU, folks. This is a metagame that I've been a bit critical of. In the early days, I viewed this as the peak of competitive Pokemon because it was the first gen to introduce a lot of important stuff like the physical special split and a lot more item variety, a lot more moves and mechanics. But I think as time has gone on, I've started to value different things in what makes a metagame good or bad, at least in my opinion. I think Gen 4 OU has its issues. I don't love the combination of Stealth Rock and no team preview, which causes kind of a scramble at the start of the game to make rocks, and that affects the lead matchups. I prefer Gen 3's lead matchups. I like that in Gen 3, no threat is really so powerful that you like have zero breathing room against it. I feel like I've got enough tools in Gen 3 to handle all the top threats, and often if I'm getting owned by something, it's my own fault because my team is structurally bad. But I feel like in Gen 4, there's a lot of offensive threats that can just destroy you if you're not prepared, and it's harder to read team structures. I feel like there's less sense of structure in this gen, at least in my experience trying to learn it. This could be a skill issue where I'm just bad. Gen 4 gamers can defend themselves if they like. In the grand scheme of things, I think Gen 4 is one of the better OU gens, even though I just listed a bunch of things I dislike about it. I think later gens have way more stupid stuff in them than Gen 4 does. Overall, Gen 4 is cool. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of fun interactions and cool Pokemon. It's pretty balanced. And I think my favorite Pokemon in this metagame is Flygon. In Gen 3, Flygon is relegated mostly to defensive roles on Superman teams. There's some sets like mixed sets with Fire Blast. They're not that great. Choice Band Flygon, not that great either. Flygon's mostly like a rock resist that can ignore spikes on defensive teams, which can make it kind of annoying, to be honest. But in Gen 4, Flygon got a huge glow up, huge buffing of dragon types in general with options like Outrage, Draco, Meteor. I think Flygon is a good representation of all the new stuff that got added to Gen 4 and why that's a good thing, because Flygon could take advantage of like Choice Scarf, Life Orb. Maybe it can even go defensive sets if you want. You can go Choice Band and go in a more aggressive direction with maybe Magnezone support or something. And it benefited a lot from the buffing of dragon types, but at the same time, you know, these are really high power moves that are really broken, but at the same time, Flygon only has like 80 special attack and 100 attack. Its stats are very reasonable, so I think this is like the coolest and best dragon type presence in the format. It's really reliable and easy to fit on teams. Scarf Flygon is some of the best pivoting and speed control, and I love mixed Flygon sets for their ability to open up defensive cores. It even has Roost for healing, which is really useful. I really like Flygon and all its moveset options and variety. I think it kind of holds the tier together in a way. It's an important Pokemon to have in the format that gives some stability, and it's always reliable and useful. Up next we have Gen 5 OU, one of the most controversial and chaotic metagames of all time. With the introduction of Drizzle on Politoed, this changed everything, and weather effects were still permanent at this time, so the game became known as the Weather Wars, where it was a scramble to set your weather and keep it up. Historically, there were Pokemon like Dugtrio used to trap and eliminate enemy weather setters and maintain your weather on the field. The metagame centering so much around weather was controversial, with effects like Swift Swim having to be banned because they were too powerful. Chlorophyll and Sand Rush eventually followed suit many years later, and then even after that there were still problems with the high power level of the gem items, which were a consumable item that gave 1.5 times power to a single attack, which enabled these hyper offense teams that were in some matchups near unbeatable and plow through their checks. Gems are even an even more powerful concept than both Z moves and Terra, in my opinion, because you can run multiple of them on a team and they don't get consumed on Protect, so they're like a really safe and powerful way for offensive threats to just blow through their checks, and it was pretty toxic playing in that metagame. I've played Gen 5 OU a lot, actually. It's probably my second most played gen. Behind Gen 3, it was the gen I started playing competitive Pokemon in, so I have a soft spot for it, and I like to return to it because I like all the threats. They're kind of nostalgic, and I like the pace of the metagame. It's fast and chaotic and fun. But I do understand that so many people hate this metagame for its imbalance, and so many people disagree on how to handle things and the identity of it. I like it anyway, despite all those flaws. And my favorite Pokemon in the metagame, and a Pokemon that I've made an entire video about, is Mamoswine. I think Mamoswine is just so awesome. This is an Ice Ground type, beautiful type combo. It's a rare Ice type that is not threatened by Stealth Rock. It has Thick Fat for additional defensive utility. It's really powerful physical attack wise, but 80 speed is like so reasonable that it's not overwhelming. It has Ice Shard for priority, which helps against Pokemon like Latios, Thundurus, Therian, Garchomp, Landorus, Therian too, and the Earthquake Icicle Crash coverage combo is like perfect coverage. It hits almost everything, I think literally everything neutrally or super effectively, which is amazing. I just love that this Pokemon's presence in the format and how it can make up for the matchup variance that is present in Gen 5. One of the biggest complaints about Gen 5 is that it can feel a bit like rock, paper, scissors, where Rain matches up really well against most hyper offense teams and it can be like impossible to break. Sometimes you can just know in team preview whether you're going to win or lose. Matchups are just so polarizing. Like a Pokemon like Volcarona can just win in a single turn, and there's sometimes little you can do about it. I think Mamoswine reduces the matchup variance a lot because it can fit on almost any team archetype. Rain, Sand, and offense teams can fit it. It helps against all the powerful dragon type threats that are really tough to deal with. Sometimes it helps against, it can threaten every kind of team structure, whether it's all in offense or like a balancy Rain team or like a balancy Sand team, offensive Sand team. Nothing loves Mamoswine. It's also immune to Sand and the occasional Hail team, which is Hail is an occasional anti-meta team you see that tries to deny enemy weather. Mamoswine can fit on like anything and threaten anything. It's also not like OP. A lot of ice types end up either terrible or OP, but Mamoswine strikes the balance of being like just a good ice type, which is a rare thing to accomplish, it seems like. It's like not horrendous defensively, isn't so fast that it's gonna just win instantaneously with its powerful coverage. It's just a good power level, and you got to be skillful to use it. You got to get it in the right situations. Getting this guy in can be hard, but requires like a bold prediction or some good maneuvering, an intelligent sacrifice, something like that. Yeah, I think Mamoswine is just straight up epic and saving grace in a metagame that is kind of chaotic and can be tough to have any sort of consistency. I think it provides a little bit of consistency and makes games more interesting. Anytime Mamoswine is in a tournament set, the game is going to be fun because like the Mamoswine could come in and there's so much it could do. Both players are trying to play around the Mamoswine. It's just a good presence that enhances the format. Up next is Gen 6 OU, and I will admit, folks, that this is one of the OU formats I have the least experience with. I played it when it was current gen. I had fun with it, but even back then I preferred other metagames. I was really big into Gen 6 Little Cup for whatever reason. That was an epic format. And I haven't really revisited this gen much, but I did play it quite a bit when it was current at first. This is a generation with quite a good reputation. I've been meaning to like get back into it and try it out more. It can be hard to juggle like a bunch of generations at once, of course, but as far as modern metagames go, I think this one's like the most well-liked among top-level players because it's quite balanced and you see a good amount of variety and development and stuff. Gen 7 got a bit crazy with Z moves and like Toxapex and other dominant forces like the Tapus. Gen 6 is more balanced. You got the addition of Defog was a significant new mechanical change, an all-new way to remove hazards, and the introduction of the Fairy type, of course. The nerfing of permanent weather was also massive, and the introduction of Sticky Web, which actually had quite a big impact on offensive teams in this generation, which are some of the more prominent ways to play offensive strategies with like Bishop, who has Defiance. Bishop got a big glow up in Gen 6. And another big mechanical change was the addition of Buffed Knockoff, which changed everything, to be honest. Became one of the best moves in the game. It was already really good utility, but now it also was offensively powerful. I think my favorite Pokemon to use back in the day was Mega Pinsir, because in Gen 7 this guy kind of fell off. It was usable, but I think in the early days I really liked using Mega Pinsir. I thought it was cool that they gave Pinsir such a good Mega form. It's like its stats are really good. It's a great breaker. Its ability is really strong, Air Relate, which converts normal type moves to flying type and gives them an attack boost. So just massive attack stat, massive returns, and like quick attacks that are flying type. I thought it was just like a really cool new mechanic that changed how you use this Pokemon and turned like an average bug type into a really awesome breaker. I like the flavor of changing normal type moves to flying, and it felt unique at the time, and I think it's still pretty good. It's still ranked OU. I don't know if Gen 6 is a gen that keeps up with like viability, but I'm sure it's still usable in the format. It seems powerful enough. I would go with Mega Pinsir for my favorite Pokemon from Gen 6 OU. Now we're into Gen 7 OU, folks, which is another kind of controversial metagame with a lot of balance issues. I mean, Z moves were really powerful. Threats were just insane, like the Ultra Beasts. Kartana in particular was with Beast Boost with the attack raise. I mean, this thing has 181 base attack. What is this? What is that? Magearna is an insane Pokemon with Shift Gear, Soul Heart, and like the best typing of all time. Don't even talk to me about Ash Greninja. One of my least favorite Pokemon. Some slight tangent here. I feel like normal Greninja was really cool with Protean, an all new ability with a novel effect that changes type based on what move you use. And then Battle Bond is just like, what if Greninja did more damage and had more stats, which I think is just less interesting than the original design of Greninja. I've always disliked Ash Greninja, but that's another topic perhaps. Anyway, in Gen 7, I played a lot of OU actually. I actually got pretty good ladder ranks back then. I was a grinder. And my favorite Pokemon in the game was Victini. And you might be wondering, what the heck is Victini doing? Victini was my response to stall teams that were really annoying me. I think at the time, conventional wisdom was to use Pokemon like Mega Gyarados and Mega Medi to break through stall, but what I found annoying about them was Mega Medi has another pretty epic Pokemon, but it has its issues because its stab types have immunities, and High Jump Kick, if they go to like their Mega Sableye, just nukes you in the face. Zen Headbutt is also shut down by Mega Sab. I found it a little hard to break through teams with this thing. There's like certain stall teams that had options to answer your coverage on Mega Medi, but Victini is like undefeatable for stall. It just hits you with I was running it with Torkoal Victini combo to make Sun and just to hit everything on Earth with V-Create. And the beauty of this is that stall teams are so slow that the speed debuff of V-Create doesn't even matter, and you can just spam it. Nothing can switch in, nothing can withstand 2 hits of V-Create. Nothing in the entire game. And even if they had, you know, Heatran with Flash Fire to answer V-Create, you can hit them with a big Bolt Strike that often 2 hits after rocks, and you outrun them because you're the fastest guy of all time. There were other Victini sets, like it had Z Celebrate, which was funny. You can run, what is it, Normalium Z? What is Celebrate? It's a move without competitive use, but if you use a Z move on it, it gives you an all stat boost, and then there was it Searing Shot was the move, and then Stored Power. Because you have a million boosts, Stored Power does a lot of damage. This was a cool set too. But I preferred, my favorite set on Victini was the Choice Band set, because I was getting fed up against stall teams, and then this set just eats them alive. They can't do anything. And it's even pretty nice against regular balanced teams too. There were a lot of people running like these balanced teams with Mega Scizor, Tapu Fini, Toxapex, Pokemon like this, and those cores just get demolished by Victini if they don't have Heatran. You could, every time you get this guy in, it's just lights out. They can't do anything. And this discovery got me pretty high on the ladder, and I'm quite proud of that to this day. It's pretty simple, but I was just like, what hits the hardest in the world? And I found it was this, and I saw results instantly. Now, Gen 8 OU is a metagame that I straight up do not like. I think that this metagame has like no personality. It doesn't appeal to me whatsoever. I would not really revisit it. And when it was current, that was when I started going back to old gens and playing old gens, because I disliked Gen 8 OU that much. I know a lot of you guys played it and enjoyed it, but me personally, this is when I kind of checked out of current Gen OU, and I was like, you know what, let's go back to the well. Let's go to Gen 3, 4, 5. And this is going to be a little bit of a cop-out. This is technically not an OU Pokemon, but my favorite Pokemon in Gen 8 OU, when it was legal, when it was allowed, was Dracovish, because I think that this Pokemon is absolutely hilarious. I don't know what they were thinking, but they gave this guy the move Vicious Rend, which power doubles if user moves before the target. I was having a blast using this guy. This move with Strong Jaw boost and 85 accuracy, 85 power, doubled to like 170 brain boost, and Choice Band. The I don't remember, the damage calcs were just out of this world for this guy. It would deal such damage. It would one-hit Ferrothorn in the rain. It would one-hit like it would one-hit everything. I don't know if Toxapex was in the game at that point. It might have been. The damage on this, I don't know what they were thinking. They just gave this guy the best move in the world. To this day, I think this is hilarious. I was abusing this as much as anyone could. I was spamming it, and I loved it. I loved Dracovish. Obviously had to go. Obviously, it was stupid because every team had water immune guys on it. I think I was slightly early to the Dracovish train though. There was like a huge hype surrounding Dracovish at some point, and it was just everywhere, and people realized how stupid it was. I was like the slightest bit early to the hype, but this is the most fun I had with Gen 8 for sure, was using Dracovish at its prime. It did get to a point where every team had Dracovish and Seismitoad or some other water immune guy, and it became really dumb. And the whole game was like, defeat their Seismitoad so your Dracovish can click the move freely. There was also Scarf set so it could have high speed, and Fisher's Rend would always have the double effect. But yeah, this is my answer, folks. This is kind of a cop-out, and to be honest, like, Gen 8 OU was not my cup of tea. I liked the early metagame with Dynamax and everything, and even though it was horrendous, I had fun with it, especially with Dracovish. After the metagame kind of lost all this stuff, I thought it became just so boring, and I checked out. Finally, here we are with Gen 9 OU. A gen that I have given much more of a chance than I did Gen 8, even though this gen has had so many problems. Terra is insane. So many of these threats are just busted. I think I do like it better than Gen 8 overall. And it's got some redeeming qualities. It's kind of fun. It has a long way to go. And the divisiveness of so many of the balancing issues have been quite, I don't know, exhausting, I guess. No one can agree on what the problem is or what to do, or everyone's just at each other's throats when you're talking about this gen. But you guys might hate me for this. This choice here might be controversial, and I know a lot of people hate this Pokemon. They think it should be banned even now. But I'm gonna be honest, my favorite Pokemon in Gen 9 OU is Goldengo. I love Goldengo. I think it's epic. Goldengo is, well, first of all, it's funny. It looks like a cheese stringer, and it is made out of gold coins, gold bullions. Got a silly name. It's all around goofy, and I can't believe they gave this Pokemon this ability. This is the most insane ability maybe ever. This Pokemon is immune to status moves. The first ever mechanic that can block defog from taking effect. It's also just immune to like everything under the sun, trick, any status move at all, stat drops, the entire world it is immune to. And its stats aren't anything to sneeze at either. It has an amazing Steel Ghost typing. I think in the initial metagame, this guy was a lot less annoying because the metagame had less options. Most teams were running Great Tusk and some way to handle Goldengo. And I think that when people started really getting annoyed with Goldengo was when Samurott Hisui came out and became a threat that could set spikes and attack at the same time. And then with the defog blocking effect and rapid spin blocking effect of Goldengo, it's like Hazard Stack became kind of a problem. Now I think it's become even more of a problem because Sticky Web is in the game now with Ribombee. I mean, Sticky Web was already in the game, but Ribombee is a far better Sticky Web setter, and Sticky Web plus reliable hazard removal counterplay in the form of Goldengo is pretty toxic. Now that knockoff is more widespread, you can actually remove boots from those defensive guys that were trying to ignore all the spikes a lot better, which is another issue. But at the same time, I like that Goldengo has kind of changed how the game is played. I enjoy using it. I enjoy its offensive capabilities, and I kind of like spike stacking strategies. It reminds me of Gen 3 OU, which is all about spike stacking and spin blocking. It kind of reminds me of that. I like that metagame is more about spikes now. I will say I think Samurott Hisui is a bit too far, but Goldengo is a common factor, and if Goldengo was gone, definitely you would be able to remove hazards more easily. I think another big issue is that hazard removal was severely restricted. There's like nothing with defog anymore. The reason Great Tusk is everywhere is because it's the best hazard remover, and that's just such an important thing to have in this metagame where Goldengo is not only a threat itself, but counterplay against hazard removal. So Great Tusk being able to threaten Goldengo and have hazard removal at the same time is such a valuable thing to have that this guy's usage is just through the roof, which is kind of a problem because why aren't there more Pokemon that can fill this role? Goldengo wouldn't be so bad if there were just more defoggers and rapid spinners that could take on Goldengo and reliably at least threaten it or do something to it. I also like that it has a lot of set variety. You can run like Nasty Plot, Recover bulky sets with Thunderwave, Hex, this kind of thing, or you can go like Specs, go all in on offense. It has decent amount of like coverage options. It's got Make It Rain, Trick. You can run like Scarf with Trick. Scarf is really nice on the more aggressive squads to make Goldengo more immediately threatening and outrun stuff. I don't know, even though I acknowledge the issues that arise from this Pokemon and the effect it's having on the metagame, which can be a bit toxic at times, I like the guy. I think he's a good guy, and I think he earned his wealth of 1,000 Gimmighoul coins. Some people say it was an inheritance. I think that those people are spreading false propaganda about Goldengo. I think Goldengo was a self-made Pokemon who picked himself up by the bootstraps and worked hard and accumulated 1,000 Gimme Ghoul coins and became good as gold. And it's a story we can all aspire to. It's beautiful. I was not paid by anybody to say this, and Goldengo is an epic Pokemon. It looks like a cheese stringer, and how can anybody be bad if they look like a cheese stringer? That's the real question. Thank you to the patrons for your continued support, and thank you as well to everyone who has donated to the prize pool for this tournament.
Oh, KO by one hit! It scattered Spike!
The money got different, 'cause of what I'm spending.